Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Projectworks podcast, a conversation and community for high growth consulting firm leaders about the stuff that keeps us up at night. My name is Dominique Ronell. I'm the Chief Customer Officer here at Projectworks. Welcome, Jacob. Lovely to see you today. Jacob is our head of brand and one of the brains behind our podcast, normally behind the scenes. Kind of cool to see you in front of the camera today.
Thank you, Dominic. It's great to be back from behind the curtains, so to speak. You might be wondering why I'm here and not Doug or Mark. Don't worry, you're not in the wrong place. We will absolutely be getting to them very shortly. As we shared earlier this season, Doug has been navigating some health issues, and he is doing well. However, due to his treatment schedule, his availability can be fairly unpredictable. So we pre-recorded this episode with him just to play it safe, and we're super excited to share it with you all, right, Dom?
Yes, we are. Really, it is a really great chat. We had this, I think it was last week. Doug has some awesome insights. In this episode, we cover some of the early days spinning out Projectworks, the idea of that coming out of some operational pain within Provoke, some really great stories about hitting some growth challenges or growth walls, as we've spoken about before. And he wraps up some really good mistakes and resets. We all know it's great to hear about challenges other people have gone through as they've been growing their companies. Learn from others' mistakes and take them forward into your day or into your planning. So I hope you get a load out of this. We'll be back at the end for a bit of a wrap up, but I think that's enough from us. How about you roll the tape? Doug, hi, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, good to be here.
You wrote a book. Here it is. You wrote a book. Very cool. It's so great to have you here. Really excited to talk to you about it. Welcome to the team.
Thanks. Yeah, I can't. Writing a book is the last thing I thought I'd ever do, but it was a good suggestion from Mark.
So great suggestion. And you guys wrote it together, and I'm really keen to get into some of the detail. But before we jump into there, do you want to intro yourself a little bit for anyone listening or watching? And after that, maybe give us a little bit of the Provoke story and kind of the background on how Projectworks came to be.
Sure. So right now I'm the COO of Projectworks, and I love working here. It's a lot of fun. But back in the olden days, long before Projectworks, I did computer science at Victoria University, and my
OG nerd, original nerd, Doug.
Yeah.
So yeah.
My first proper job, after KFC, that is, was working for a company called Glazier, and that was a software consultancy in the 90s. And one of my bosses was Rod Drury. So Rod Drury is the founder of Xero, and he was a great boss.
I bet. What a cool person to work for at such a young age. Yeah.
Little did I know how famous he would become. In fact, my very first project at Glazier, as I was coding, was finishing a project that Rod had started, and he was moving on to something else, and so that was my first
awesome
Microsoft Access. Anyway, so and so that was my first taste of consulting firms and software development. It was a lot of fun, and that was through the 90s. And then Rod Drury and his co-founders sold at the end of the 90s, and it was bought by an oil firm, strangely enough.
Wow.
Yeah. Obviously, the .com bubble that was soon to be,
of course,
2000. Everybody was, wanted to get into this thing called internet, and so all these software firms are being bought up. Anyway, so at Glazier, which I learned a lot from. You could see that this company that bought Glazier didn't really know what they were doing. They bought all sorts of consulting firms around Australia and New Zealand, and so me and some my colleagues naively thought we could do it ourselves. How hard would that be? And so we started Provoke on April Fool's Day, 2001, April the 1st. A sign of things to come.
Great. What a milestone.
And naivety is a great enabler. If I'd known how hard it would be. We were in our 20s, we were super young. Might not have done it, but
yeah, I'm sure you wouldn't have if you'd known what was here. That's the thing. I agree. I think just jumping in is half the half the battle or half the opportunity with founders or entrepreneurs, just having the energy to say yes and just jump in without thinking too hard about how hard it might be.
Totally.
So sounds like you guys had that in spades.
Yeah, for sure. And there's 5 of us, and we had a diverse range of skills and passions. I was one of the nerds, so my job was to build the software, whereas the other guys were selling and project managing and all that sort of stuff. And to cut a long story short, over the following 20 years, at its peak, we grew it to 150 staff with offices in Wellington, Auckland, and Seattle. A brief attempt at starting an office in Manila. Few battle scars from that one.
Yeah, I can imagine the mistakes along the way. That's also important. That's part of the curve,
And initially, I looked after the developers, but I grew into sort of like a CIO, COO type role as the company got much bigger. And whilst I don't code anymore, I still have a passion for databases and spreadsheets, and I learned about SaaS companies and annuity revenue as opposed to services revenue that a classic consulting firm does, like Provoke, and born out of Provoke was Projectworks. So,
and so tell me about that. How did that work? Projectworks. Well, it wasn't called Projectworks then, but how was it born out of Provoke? How did that start?
Yeah, so when we started in 2001, one thing we learned from Glazier is, you got to do your timesheets and invoices to our customers are, generated from those timesheets. And so back in 2001, we didn't have a lot of money when we started. Certainly this was before cloud software. You had a PC in the corner, which was our mail server and our website. Coincidentally, that sort of every now and then our email and our website would die when somebody accidentally unplugged the computer to do their ironing.
Awesome.
And so classic software developers, we were like, we can build our own timesheet software. And so we did. That was my job as before we built a book of customers that kept me busy. I built some timesheeting software and some invoicing software off that. And so that was back in 2001. And as the years rolled on, the requirements for running, a growing consulting firm required that, well, we need to do more than just capture timesheets and generate invoices.
Yeah.
We needed to resource hundreds of staff. And so I discovered how our project managers were resourcing people, and I systematized that into what we at the time we called project control. And so my staff loved it. They loved resourcing staff and forecasting. And often we had staff join Provoke from other organizations, and they would always look at our software and go, wow, this is amazing. I wish I'd had this where it come from. We had nothing like this. And every now and then when somebody would leave, they would reach out to me a month or two later and say, can you sell that? Because the place that I've gone to, they don't have a very good system. So we kind of knew we were onto a winner. And so, eventually I met Matt and Julian, who are some of the co-founders of Projectworks, and they took over writing the code as I became too old for that sort of thing. Kids these days. So towards the end of Provoke, before we sold it, we had an amazing internal system. It was on premise, built with chewing gum and sticky tape by grads, but it had an amazing kernel of something that everybody thought was, a great piece of software.
Yeah. Very cool. I like that, held together by sticky tape and chewing gum. That as many internal systems that are put together often are, just work, but then this is it, came out to a product. And I think you also really touched on something there about, people enjoying doing that. As consultancies grow, systems change, the way of working have to change, you evolve into products and use more of their features. So I guess the question is, now that Projectworks is the company it is, we're over 700 customers, we're selling across the world. Why do you think it's been so well received? Do you think it's for the very same reasons that it led you to build it in the first place? Or do you think there's something else there?
Good question. I mean, I think there's a few reasons why it's resonating so well. I think it's an all-in-one system. It's not a point solution. It does quite a few things that you need to have it as a consultancy. It's got some great UX. People really appreciate software that has got a good user interface, and so
of course, nice to use. If you're in there every day, it's got to be nice to use.
Yeah. It's really important. It's got a super strong Xero integration. Plug back to Rod. Obviously, Xero is the dominant accounting platform in New Zealand, Australia, and the UK, and and because of that, that's what people kind of expect. And it was born from a consulting firm. It wasn't just a theoretical piece of software that somebody probably needs this. It's come as a direct result of, I know what I need because this is what I used to have to do when I was running a consulting firm, and so all of those things combined, kind of means that people love our software. So it's really cool.
It is very cool, isn't it? And I think one of the reasons I love working with our customers so much is because you're right, there's a need. There's, people are building these great companies, working so hard in consulting firms, and there is a need to evolve processes so that they can run faster or smoother or streamline. And I think that comes to, you wrote a book. Mark and Doug, you wrote it together. Very cool. So, I think when you looked across consulting firms, what is it that you saw that was happening that you thought, someone needs to write this down? Someone needs to write the book?
I think for me, it was looking back on my experience at Nexient. I was discovering what I had to do each day and each week, and I really didn't know. I had no model for it. I sort of used the playbook from Accenture because I had worked there. But they're whatever they are, 30 billion, 50 billion, some giant number firm today, and we were 200 people. So it doesn't really apply in the same way, but we could at least take some inspiration from it. But yeah, after the whole journey at Nexient, I kind of look back, and a lot of things became more clear afterward. And I felt like, wow,
right.
You take all this time to learn that, it'd be great to share it because other people are going to go through a similar journey. And as far as I know, there wasn't a good sort of way that was captured anywhere.
That's pretty cool. And on that, for anyone who's listening, in this book I keep talking about, the 50 million consulting firm, really here it's like from startup to scale. It's a blueprint for growing your consulting business. Is that the right elevator pitch for that, Mark, for anyone who's listening? This book, it's
I think so.
Right? It's the really different stages.
And that's really, I think, part of why it made so much sense for me and Doug to do it together is that he and the guys at Provoke started at zero and really did that. I think the harder part of the journey is that zero to, getting the company going, beginning to get a real flywheel. And I took over Nexient in the 30 millions and took it to 130 million. So it was like between the two, I feel like we covered a whole lot of ground. And it also was fun to talk to Doug about the different experiences at different scales and sort of create that model together.
It's a really interesting point because also, not only is it looking at how to run a company, but it's also writing a book, which is different to just sort of like coaching someone professionally, I think. So, Doug, when you wrote this book or you wrote it together, did it force you to clarify anything for yourself that you like? I imagine there was a part of it where it's like all these things that you've just instinctively known for years, you almost, have to fully articulate to be able to write it all down.
Yeah, I mean, it was fun to reflect back on the journey, and like Mark said, I sort of, I think, oh, all the mistakes were made and all the things we didn't know. I wish I'd had this book when we were starting. Uh, and yeah, I mean, I think we got I think on our journey we got some things right, and we did a few things quite wrong. We learned the hard way, and it'd be great to sort of make sure that somebody else doesn't make the same dumb mistakes we did. But the things that we did right, do those. And in terms of writing, personally, writing is not my strength. Give me a spreadsheet and a database.
Say, give you a database, give you some numbers, or you're away. Yep.
So I have to admit, my contribution to writing this book was more describing my journey, and then somebody else turn that into words.
That's awesome. I like that. So talking about that, I think one of the things that you're saying, I wish I had this book when I was running things, is often if you is in consulting firms, especially any fast growing organizations, everything is at such a pace that it's quite hard to essentially stop and say, am I focusing on the right things? Are all these things that I'm focusing on the right metrics that matter, or the right areas, across there? So to get into now sort of some of the content that you have put in the book, if you had to put it out there, what do you think leaders most often misdiagnose as they're going through this process? And I guess as a place to start, when growth stalls, if you think of yourself as a fast-growing company and your growth is stalling, what do you think leaders most often misdiagnose at that stage?
Yeah, I think of a couple things. We kind of captured two walls in there. One is where in the very beginning, we're sort of recommending that you, or as the founder or founders, pretty much do everything. Like you are the reason this firm got going. Clients want to buy from you. They're probably based on relationships you've already built. You need to do everything until one day you are the problem because you've run out of time and you are blocking everything and the firm won't grow until you find a way to get out of the way a little bit. And so it's an interesting kind of contradiction. So there's a first wall where the founders can't do everything and they need to bring in um, what I think of as hands-on leaders. So somebody who can sell, not so much build a whole sales team, but somebody who can sell with them and somebody who can deliver with them. And then that goes for a while. And then you have another like moment where it breaks, where those people plus the founder run out of bandwidth. And that's kind of where I took over at Nexient. We were just hitting that. I didn't understand it. And we got lucky that we pulled the founder out because he had two companies and he could only run one of them. And then I tried to figure out why we couldn't keep growing, and I eventually figured it out. But I only like learned kind of years later about that wall and why we were struggling so much. And I've talked to a lot of people who've been stuck at either the first wall or the second wall, where they're like, yeah, we got to this level of revenue and then we bounced back and then we did it again and then we bounced back. And they're kind of not sure why that's happening. And I think it's these kind of constraints, either the founder or the founder plus their team. Uh, so I wish somebody explained that to me that like before I even took this crazy journey on. And I only really understood it like 5 years later or 7 years later.
That is an interesting point, because that is a great concept that you sort of coined within the book around these growth walls, because by definition, as I read it, it's like things are going really well until suddenly they're not, sort of like you're reporting, you're growing, growing, growing. And so there might be a period of time, a year, 6 months, where you're like, yes, I'm nailing this. This is going very well. And then suddenly you're like, what happened? I can feel that it's not going well, but I can't quite see. And so from what I got when I was reading it is that this is a normal thing that will happen. That even if you're very successful, you are going to reach these growth walls. And so how to identify them ahead of time, rather than, as I guess you were just saying, Mark, you were like, this feeling that I'm not quite sure how to navigate the next steps.
Yeah, and for us, it doesn't, nobody comes to you and says you've hit a growth wall. Like the symptoms I got were like an email from one of my client partners saying, this client just fired us. We had 50 people and they're all coming to the bench in a week. And I was like, what? Like, later you kind of get the distance from it to realize like, oh, we don't really have a good sort of way to manage expectations with clients and make sure the quality's right. And like there's a whole lot of systems that we're missing that led us to get a surprise 50-person engagement ending like 6 months early. And the client actually wanted a refund, which I didn't have the cash to pay. And so like, but they don't come to you and say you've hit a growth wall and like these are the 5 things you should fix. You just
Yes.
like, oh crap. Like now what
It's
do
almost
I do?
contradictory because you think if you're growing at such a rapid pace, then that's a great thing. But actually, what you are then introducing is another series of problems and challenges that you and your team are going to have to overcome. Doug, what about you? Looking back, what are some things that you think you're like, oh, I made that one way too late?
I mean, I experienced that where the founders did every single thing, and then all of a sudden growth really started to take off and it was starting to become hard. And so, we had to hire other leaders and step back. And so, and that's not a trivial thing as well, because we've made a few mistakes in our first set of, people to sort of lean on to help us. We didn't necessarily see eye to eye. And so, and at the same, we actually hit with the GFC in the late 2008 sort of, and so we sort of went backwards for a few years before we realized actually whilst we need to step back and let other people help, they need to be the right people. And then we got it right, a few years later, and growth really picked up again. And so it was kind of my journey. We then made another mistake where we had too many people, too many non-billables, and we didn't really truly appreciate, what a burden that was. So it was always one step forward, one step back, one step forward, one step back, and we kind of learned the hard way the whole time. So it was fun journey.
I can imagine, and you're right. I think anyone who's been in a growing consulting firm would resonate with that, the billable versus non-billable roles, because you need those sort of leaders or non-billable roles to take you to the next level. Often it's the toss up, do you hire someone slightly more junior or someone quite senior across there? I think, these days talking to customers, fractional models of that have become more popular.
Yeah.
A dip into resources, but those flows to be, what you need at that time. Because when you are hitting those growth walls or growing fast, you would benefit a lot from some quite key strategic advice from some people in those roles. But that's quite a big pivot to say, I'm going to hire this like top end non-billable role.
Or a bunch of them.
Or a bunch of them. Yeah. Talking about that, you talked about a sort of financial crisis hitting there. Do you think anything's been changing in there's lots of stuff that's been changing, but what is your thoughts on the changing consulting landscape that makes scaling harder or different than when you were running your firms?
I think the pace of the economy is faster. So in a good way and in a bad way, it's just faster and you just have to move faster. So when we were doing Nexian, a lot of the hard work was like, say, 2016, 2018, 2019. And we were trying to get ahead of a technology adoption curve. So we were trying to offer a service that was a little bit ahead of the market and was about to experience a growth curve. And we had about a 3-year window to do that. And we got very lucky. We got it right. It went through a growth curve. We were able to get acquired before the growth curve ended. And so like we kind of nailed that timing. I feel like that kind of growth curve might be 6 months now or 12 months instead of 3 years. So these market windows are shorter. And, just every month it feels like there's a new way to apply AI to technology or to whatever you're looking at. And so it's compressing the cycles. That's probably the biggest theme I see.
Yeah. I wanted to ask about if there was ever a point when you were working through a business and it looked successful externally, but internally you knew something was breaking. Kind of comes back to these sort of growth walls again. Like, is there ever a point where it's like from outside, everyone's like, they're killing it, but inside you can see there's some big challenges coming along?
Definitely. Like we had a few years there where our revenue was just growing really fast. But we weren't managing our costs very well. So our margins were actually shrinking. So on
Right.
the outside, everybody thought, oh, wow, you guys are killing it. But the pressure on running the business, making payroll, and all the things that leaders of consulting firms sort of worry about at night were growing as the years rolled by. Those fundamental basics that I wish we'd known earlier on, because we could have gotten ahead of that. It wouldn't have been hard to sort of do that better. But by the time you kind of realize the mistake, you've got to undo that damage. That's my story.
I think I'm just kind of building on that. I think there's like which I know you have now, Doug. I don't know if you did then, of financial literacy that
Yeah,
everybody needs to have in these firms, and most people don't. So they're just, it seems like, you've got a big client, they're your best client, they want something, you give them three people for 3 months for free in order to win some giant thing, but nobody does the math that if our margins are roughly 35%, those three people, you need to have three more people billable for like 3 months to break even on that, right? Or something like
totally.
that. Or for each month that they worked, so like it's you burn all this cash when it feels like you're doing all the right things, but if you don't have people really dialed into the financial model, same thing when you add like, okay, we should get a practice leader and you hire a senior person, they're very expensive, they're not billable, or maybe they're half billable. And nobody does the math on like how much are we actually having to add to our billable hours just to break even on that move. And I learned that over the time, but I wish I had really deeply understood that at the beginning, because it was just, yeah, there's just so many things we did that we didn't understand. We were kind of harming ourselves. We thought we were doing all the right things.
Yeah, you're winning work, everybody's busy, you're growing. And you're right, the financial literacy was kind of like, it doesn't necessarily come naturally. And you don't know what you don't know. And often like months roll by and it's, when you finally realize that something's going wrong, takes a bit of time to fix that.
Absolutely. And I feel that talking to our customers, Projectwork customers, a lot, at our ICP are growing firms. So quite often we have customers that come on who have a real need to resourcing and timesheets. They really need to sort out those kind of basic practices within their organization. But fundamentally, it's the information that gives you. If you get those practices working really well, then you have these insights. And that's when you can have these aha moments. Like our biggest customer that we keep giving our best people to, that is taking up my most time to manage, is our least profitable client. And you can make decisions from that, right? You can decide that that's still worth it for a variety of reasons. But if you don't have those insights, that's where you can just keep running really fast and end up at the end of a year going, why is this, we've had all this growth and we feel like we're working so hard, but without being able to cut those core financial measures, then that's a really hard to move forward with your team and with your strategy, I think.
You can also, I think, turn that, if you understand it, you can turn it into goodwill. So if you don't even understand it, you probably haven't framed it to your customer or to your client in a way that says, by the way, you're my least profitable client. Here's why, like this is worth 100,000. I'm doing it for 50. This one's worth, whatever, however you want to frame it. But my guess is if you don't understand it, you haven't framed it well with the client. So they think, that's just how you operate, and they kind of take it for granted.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. There's absolutely a point there. Now, when you were writing the book, doesn't have to be the most aha moment, but what was one aha moment when you were going through that you were like, oh, I'm so glad this is in here. This is a really important piece for people to know.
Well, I call it my oh shit moment. So we were doing the book, and in parallel, we were building this cheat sheet. We were trying to create like one giant PDF that had how to grow your firm. And that, I hadn't really in my head articulated like these two walls before. And so we ended up organizing the cheat sheet by these two walls. And then we were like, I remember Jacob was working with us on the book, and he sent a Slack, and he was like, "I think we're almost done. I think we have like a few days left." And then I just kind of looked at the book and the cheat sheet, and they didn't match. Like they had a
Right.
different framework and I was just like, I think we need to redo the whole like structure of the book.
Yeah.
And then I went and I looked at the outline. I was like, I think we need 12 more chapters, you know? So we went from like, I think we're almost done to, yeah, oh shit, we
We've
got a
got
lot
more
more to
work to
write.
do. Yeah.
Yeah. But in the end, they kind of sync now. And so the cheat sheet is effectively an outline in a way of the book, which felt better, but it kind of crystallized all of this was nothing I had really put together before. Like the process of writing it makes you kind of be more clear about it and learn about it yourself. That was
Yeah, I
kind
can
of
imagine
cool.
that.
Yeah, and the whole book sort of, in hindsight, sort of really reflects my journey. It's sort of, when we started this, I think I've blocked out some of the memories of the hard times, but then having to sort of think about them all and, and putting my anecdotes into the various chapters, it's sort of like, yeah, no, this is exactly the journey that I went on, and all these other firms have to do the same thing, yeah.
I love it. It sounds like business therapy. Could recommend it as the
Yeah,
Lots of therapy there.
it's a great way to think about it. It's funny, the whole thing started for me with just a Slack from somebody on the marketing team saying, "Can you write a blog post about your experience at Nexient?" And I remember getting that and thinking, I don't think so. I think it was like, 9 years. There was a lot of trauma in there. Like, I don't think that's one blog post. So then I didn't even answer. I like went and I just tried to like frame what would I write. And I came back and I said, I think I could write about 35 blog posts. Do you want that? It was kind of quiet.
And so now it's a full book. It's bound.
Yeah, but it ended up being like I started as some blogs and then we kind of like took that and it gets more and more organized the more you work on it. So even in the beginning, I didn't really understand the structure or the framework at all. So it's kind of a fun process. You kind of learn a lot on your way as you try to write it down and frame it up.
Okay, so thinking about that, what book would you write next?
Well, there's an easy one, which is we said there's two walls, three phases, but we really only wrote the first two phases. So I think we even said in there we're thinking about the next one. So we could write the third phase, which is getting your firm to 100, 150 million. So that's one for sure. I don't know,
Cool.
Doug, what else? What else should we write
I'm not
about?
sure. I'm not sure if writing books is my strength. Um, I guess the only sort of thing I sort of reflect on that maybe some firms deal with is this the dynamic of co-founders, and there are some firms that only have one or two people, whereas we had a group of five with quite different personalities, and I think I'm not sure if I think being honest about the strengths and weaknesses of that dynamic is something that's worth reflecting on, and because I think we made a few own goals because not everybody was always on the same page, and so that could be something we could write about.
Dig into. Yeah, I like that. Very cool. Final question you could leave people with. What are a couple of books? Do you have any business books that you like yourself? I mean, obviously but potentially the point of this was to help other consulting firms that are growing, learn from mistakes, have a bit of a guide. Have you got any other top books you want to shout out that have been favourites of yours during your career?
For me, I've only got. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I've only got one business book. I'm more of a fiction reader, but
much more fun.
Yeah, much more fun. The Science of Scaling by Mark Roberge, which is more aimed at software as a service type companies, but
yeah, right.
There's some elements in there that are relevant to services companies, and that's been crucial in helping us on our journey as Projectworks. It talks about the phases of growth. As a SaaS company, which is what we've written, the phases of growth for services companies. It's an awesome book, and really scratches my data itch.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, if there was only one book, it's an old one. It's Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey Moore. And he's the first. The way he describes it is he observed this technology adoption curve in the way that
Mhm.
markets develop. And I think it was in the late 80s or early 90s he observed it, and he wrote about a lot of startups. He wrote another version of the book in like 2005 or somewhere around there, where he kind of updated all the examples. But it's still true today. The way that that society adopts new technology fits this model, and it's to me it's fascinating. I've sort of spent my whole career working on different technologies and how they get adopted and different points in the curve. And but yeah, so even when I went to a consulting firm, that's how we thought about what is the offering, where is it on that curve? How do we get one that's about to go up the steep part of the curve? How do we know when the steep part of the curve is going to stop so we can sell the company while it's at its peak value? And all of that was all back to what was originally meant for like tech startups and but we kind of applied it to consulting as well.
Yeah, it's very cool. And for me, I think there's a book that we talk about internally as well, or there's a mini podcast around the growth mindset by Carol Sweck, is it? I just think that's such a good one for me as a leader. That's always been a really good one to go to, with my team when we're going through that. And I think going back to some of the comments you made around the pace of business change, Mark, I think things move very quickly. And I think it's about these days getting your team comfortable with the pace of change as well. So I think growth mindset, being able to change very quickly, continuing to practice being good at things is always a sort of a great foundation for a team or a leader or any company that's looking to move fast.
Yeah, it's a fantastic book. It's always close. It's often one I recommend if I only get one. But
Yes. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
great
great.
book.
Apart from this one, the $50 million
Yeah.
consulting firm. Very cool. Thank you, Doug, for joining us. Really great to chat to you both today about this. What a great chat and some good comments in the in the webinar chat that people have been tuning in. What a good one. That was so nice. It was so great to grab that time with Doug and get sort of the download of his brain.
Totally, eh? I just love Doug's honesty of what it takes to build a firm from the ground up and how just so transparent about the path being full of both wins and mistakes. And
Yeah.
Also just kind of crazy that two guys in such different countries, different parts of the world, and different points in time have such similar experiences.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. You think about, creating consultancies in the US and New Zealand, different markets, but yeah, some really similar themes around like the bottlenecks of founders. I really liked because it resonated with sort of in roles I've been in before, when you feel like maybe like that growth, like you're like winning deals and shouting out at the end of every week or every quarter, but the operations means that is not turning into really successful, I guess, margin or outcomes at the end of at the piece, winning these amazing projects, maybe not getting the margin or the profit you need out of them. Two different sides of the coin, eh?
Yeah, totally. Tell you what I didn't love was Mark reminded me about writing 12 more chapters of the book. I think I've got some sort of like book production PTSD after that exercise. But speaking of, I've shared the link in the chat, and note your comment, Tessa. We are working on getting that book available on Amazon and in printed version. Amazon has just been a bit of a colorful company to work with and getting a book listed. So
it wasn't as easy to get it up as we hoped, because we want to get it into the hands of as many people as possible. Of course, if you go the effort to write a book. So yes, it would be very cool to get that out to more people. I know you've already said it, but you can grab a copy of Mark and Doug's book on the Projectworks website. Is that right, Jacob?
Yep, links in the chat there. There's Apple books available and an expressions of interest form for a printed copy, which we're working on as well. So
perfect. Fantastic. Well, thank you everybody for tuning into a great chat. Again, I'm really so grateful and happy that we could have Doug, even if it was a bit of a pre-record across that. Thanks for joining us, Jacob, coming out from behind the camera, front of camera, joining me. It's been really fun. Thank you everyone for listening today, joining. You can find us all on LinkedIn, and please make sure you subscribe to the Projectworks podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. We will be back in 2 weeks, and we're covering the path from ops lead to COO. So a really good one for delivery and ops leads, or any founders who are still wearing all the hats. So please join us for what no doubt will be a great conversation. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Bye.